Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to a fresh edition of GTF, Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia, and I have been looking forward to this episode since Greg says, maybe I can get this guy on, because he is one of my favorite all-time sports writers who covers the Chicago Bears, going back to the days of Don Pearson and Cooper Rallo. But I'll let Mr. Greg Gabriel do the introduction. Greg, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Oh, man, I am so psyched for this, and people in the chat room are psyched as well. Why don't you introduce your guest?
Well, we got Brad Biggs from the Tribune, and Biggsy and I have been friends going back to 2001 when I got here, because we came here at the same time.
Oh.
And I gotta ask him where he came from, because I don't remember, and I probably knew. Biggsy, how you doing, buddy?
How you guys doing?
You're doing real good. So where were you before you came here in 01?
I did the Sun-Times, doing some editing and stuff of that nature. Covered a little 1AA football in Pocatello, Idaho. Covered preps and such in Elgin for a while. So I'd been doing a couple different things before I was fortunate enough to get on the beat back in 01.
Because I remember we were up in Platteville, and it was probably one of the first days at camp, and I wandered out around town just to see, and I walked into a bar, and there you were, and you introduced yourself, and we had a couple gustos that night. I don't know if you remember that, but I do.
I do. Pocatello was a good town. That was a lot of fun. I think I asked you about the Giants had a big right tackle named Scott Gregg, who I had seen play at Montana when I was covering the Big Sky. He was a particularly good player at the 1AA level. I think he was probably just sort of an average guy in the NFL, but you had been with the Giants when I believe Gregg was selected.
Yeah, for 17 years before that. Yeah, we took him, and in all honesty, that's a name I haven't even thought about in years. I don't remember. I think he started for a little bit, but I don't remember how good of a career he had.
I think he played for a super long time, but he was a guy that stood out at the 1AA level. He was blocking for a guy who was a sensational college quarterback that was probably before his time. When you look at what some of the smaller quarterbacks have been able to accomplish since, Dave Dickinson, and he went on to a Hall of Fame career in the CFL, and he's been a very successful coach in Canada as well. But Dave Dickinson was a record setter at the 1AA level. I believe he was a Walter Payton, the 1AA Player of the Year. And so Gregg was blocking for him at Montana, which they had a wide open passing attack designed by Don Reed, who was famous in the Northwest, was I think a guy credited at least somewhat maybe with the development of Dan Fouts going back even further.
Well, the Montana program has always been a top program at that FCS level. I mean, I think it's rare that they don't make the playoffs. And
they develop linemen. A lot of those schools up there do a really nice job of bringing in offensive linemen that are maybe guys that are growing late in high school or even early into their college career. They're picking up players that maybe Washington State, and perhaps the Oregon schools kind of pass over. And so these smaller programs are able to get those linemen. And Idaho has turned out some successful offensive linemen over the years. Eastern Washington. So,
it's the same with North Dakota State too.
Yeah, exact same thing. Where kids that are overlooked at maybe by some of the Big Ten schools land in programs like that, and they're able to flourish and make it to the next level.
So, Biggsy, let me ask you. We'll switch to the important topic here. What's your take on this Bears team this year?
I've been thinking about this for the past week or two. I don't know how many 10 years or so have come off a season where, let's say, they're 4-12 or worse, and there's been and not just because of a draft pick that they brought in. Obviously, you bomb out, you get the number one pick, and you're able to get an Andrew Luck or somebody like that, and I think that gives you some buzz. But with how things are configured in the division right now, with the offseason that the Bears have had, it's going to be very interesting. I don't think there's going to be any shortage of storylines. And to me, it's kind of difficult to really target wins. This is a young team. If they experience some success in the first 4, 5, 6 weeks of the season, that can be something they can build off of. And they're going to have to get on a little bit of a roll. You talk about learning how to win. Well, they sure as heck didn't learn how to win last year. Nope. And they're going to need to do that at some point. But if they can get off to a promising start, who knows what's possible? If they stumble out of the gate, that's all right. They can find their footing in mid to late October. And because I think when polls came in with Matt Eberflus, probably on the calendar, they're circling 2024, and I still believe that. But that doesn't mean you should put any type of ceiling on what this group this year can accomplish.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I have been saying all along that the key to this season is the first 4 games. And if they can come out of the gate and win 3 out of those 4, and on paper, they should be in 3 out of those 4 games, with Kansas City being the game that's a loss, then that builds momentum going into the next 4, and the next 4 are a little bit tougher. And then, if you just start splitting each 4-game set after that, you end up with about 9 wins. And that's a winning season. I'll take that.
Wasn't it a lot easier though when they only played 16 and you could actually divide this season into 4 quarters?
Well, I divided it in 4 quarters plus 1.
4 quarters, yeah. I mean, you do that, or you go 4-4, 5-4. So it's really young roster with some exciting players, and I think one of the things Poles did that you hear people talk about a lot, but sometimes you hear them talk about it more than they do it, is he put an emphasis on brought in, and I'm talking about guys brought in via methods other than the draft, so free agency, trade, whatever. He's gotten younger guys who you feel like they are in the prime of their career or entering the prime of their career. So this isn't a football team that was you needed a 31-year-old player who's maybe still at an elite level, but that window for him being there is closing quickly. And I'm looking at guys like Tremaine Edmonds and DJ Moore and Nate Davis. I mean, it's when you're going to go out and invest as you're rebuilding, I think you want to do it with guys where you feel like, hey, we feel like we got 3-4 solid years here, and so they did that, and so that's why it's still going to be a young team. Some of these guys that are making money aren't old. They've got experience, but you don't feel like there's too much tread has come off the tire.
Well, Edmonds, I've been, because I'm a Buffalonian, I've been watching that. I've probably seen every game of his career, or maybe I've missed two. And I interviewed him when he was coming out for this thing for ESPN, like a month before the draft or whatever. And he's really a good kid. But I think he has grown so much between his rookie year and last year. When he came in as a rookie, he, I don't think he was more reactive than instinctive. That's probably the best way to say it. And then I remember watching last year, and I called a friend of mine in Buffalo. I said, damn, has that guy improved? I think he's the biggest signing in the offseason, and obviously the money says that too. But he's going to do, in my opinion, in pass defense game, very similar to what Urlacher could do. Because he can really cover, and he could probably cover man-to-man better than Brian could.
Move, and he's got the length and the dimensions. If you have him stand next to Urlacher when Urlacher was in his prime,
he's taller.
The height, the length. So that's a difficult player to throw around, whether it's in man or zone coverage, and they needed to get better on defense. It's easy to look at what they don't have on defense, but we could spend an awful lot of time talking about what they have added on defense to a group that, everyone talks about. Justin Fields needed to be surrounded with more talent, and you're not going to get an argument from me at all on that. But that defense last year was terrible. When you can't stop the run and you can't rush the passer, I mean, that's a recipe for losing a whole lot of ball games. And they couldn't do either one, right? They were not equipped. They were not equipped. I think how good this defense can be this season, to me, more important than whether or not they're able to go out and get a pass rusher here in the next 6 weeks is how the young defensive tackles develop, and they're going to be thrown into the fire. They're going to get an opportunity to be in the rotation right away, and the better they perform, I think the better the whole unit will be. But they've got some interesting guys in the middle of that defensive line when you look at this season, next year, and kind of down the road a little bit.
Well, the guy they brought in for the Raiders, Billings, I think is really an interesting guy. And I went back and looked at college tape, and he is one strong dude. He's kind of like a little bigger, little stronger Spice Adams.
I mean, he's Spice had a little wiggle to him. I don't know how much wiggle Billings has, but when you talk about a two down run defender in the middle of your defensive line, to me, that was a sneaky good signing when you talk about what they had to pay. They didn't have to pay him a whole heck of a lot. Now, as you know, the only guys that really get paid in the middle anymore are the guys that can collapse the pocket and get a little pass rush going. But they didn't have that last year, as you know. They didn't have a nose to stop the run. I mean, it was really difficult, and I just feel like they're going to need production from those defensive tackles in order for their marquee signings at linebacker to look good. Otherwise, Edmonds and Edwards, they're going to be sitting there and they're going to be like, well, this defensive line isn't anything like the ones we played in front of last year. The Eagles line was incredible and will be very talented again this year. They're going to need to slow up some opposing offensive linemen for those linebackers to be able to perform to their level.
What will be interesting, the way I look at it, is how are they going to use the two rookies in the rotation? So is it going to be a rookie and a veteran? So let's say it's Jones and Dexter with one group in the rotation, and then Billings and Zach on the other part of the rotation. So they got a vet and a rookie instead of putting 2 vets and 2 rookies.
You start out that way, but I'll tell you what, if Dexter and Pickens are playing well, when you get to November, roll them out there together. I mean, that's you really wanted them to get some help at edge rusher, but they could have a mini Tommy Harris and Tank Johnson thing going here, right? If those guys are playing well, because I think that's one of the things that stuck with me when you talk to the coaches and Poles and his staff. They feel like can would they be in a run stopping situation? Maybe not right away, but let's see what they can do. Let's see how they perform. Preseason is going to be interesting for those guys, and you oftentimes, I don't know if you hear it, Greg, you get questions about, well, who's going to start? And to me, this is a position where, starting's nice, but you're getting.
It doesn't matter. It's how many snaps are you playing?
Yeah, you're going to get a real clear indication of how the staff feels about these guys by just looking at the snap totals.
Right. And it'll probably work out 55-45 or maybe even close to 50-50 if they like everybody.
Yeah, and like Dervon Dexter's a guy who was probably on the field too much last year at Florida, because he was a stud for him and he never came off the field. And you had to take him off the field a little bit more. Maybe you have a little bit more production.
Yeah, no question about that.
Interesting position.
What they got to do is get a pass rusher, a pure pass rusher. But in my opinion, right now, there's only 2 out there on the market, on the street. There's Ngakoue and there's Houston. And Houston, as good as he's played the last couple of years, he's still 34, and that goes away from what Poles has been doing as far as signing people.
If you brought in either one of those guys, Greg, when you get to February and the beginning of March, you're going to be talking about the Bears' top needs for 2024, and it very well.
I've been saying all along, 2 of their top 3 will be pass rushers.
Yeah, I mean, Yannick Ngakoue is 28 years old. He's had 8 sacks or more in every season in the NFL, and I think it's probably apparent that the value he placed on himself entering this offseason has exceeded what any of the teams has been willing to pay to this point. Could that shift if some team has an injury? I guess, but if you're unsigned on July 18th, that you either can't play or your terms don't match what a team has, and I think we all know he can play. He's a designated pass rusher. Based on the many people I've talked to about him over the last couple months, as he's remained unsigned, you do not want him on the field in run situations, but he would add something that they are missing on the roster right now, and we'll see where he ends up. But obviously, his price tag has shock to teams up to this point.
Well, it's interesting, though, because I looked at his play time, and except for one season, he's been over 70% of the defensive snaps every year.
Games. He does not miss games. He answers the bell on Sundays, and you talk about, okay, well, how much are you going to have a guy like that on the field? Well, how often are you a nickel, right? You're a nickel,
right?
75%. Yeah, minimum of 70% of the time. So that would seem to match up. I think he's considered a solid guy too. He's not some guy you look at and you say, well, geez, in 2019 he had an arrest for this. There's none of that with this guy.
No.
So he remains a possibility for the Bears and just about anyone else at this point. He did go on, I believe it was Sirius XM back in the late spring, and he talked about a goal being to sign with a contender. I think at this point he's probably willing to sign with anyone. I'd written something at the time like, well, if he picks the Bears, that would be a sign that he thinks, they're on the move, like George Jefferson. They're moving on up. But at this point, he's money thing. He's got to get that to work for someone, and he's probably staring at another 1-year deal. I mean, he's a guy, when you see a player who's bounced around like he has, and I think it's been 5 teams in 5 years, Jacksonville, Minnesota, Baltimore, Las Vegas, and the Colts, the first thing that enters my mind is, well, this is a guy who has trouble fitting into the locker room. And in talking to people, I don't think that's the case. You've got legit concerns about him playing the run. The Bears should know him. They should have a full scouting report. Their defensive line coach, Travis Smith,
he coached him in Oakland or Vegas.
Yeah, so they would full well inside and out what they're buying if they're able to get him, and it's a need. Would he transform this defense? I don't think so. I find that hard.
But he's going to give them something they don't have.
Right? Would he make it better? No question.
Speaking about what he said a couple months ago, in the last 4 days, he's done 2 interviews. One was on Good Morning Football Friday, and then another one was either Sunday or yesterday. And he's come off this multi-year deal, want to go to a contender. It's turned to, hey, I just want to sign a contract and play for somebody, no matter who it is.
When he first got to Indianapolis last year, he talked about how the community had embraced him and how much he loved it there and how much he wanted to retire in Indianapolis. So, he switched agents. He's been through Rosenhaus. Rosenhaus is known to be a deal maker. You would imagine something gets done for him in the next week or so, unless they pivot and are of the mind that maybe they see if there's a team that has an injury crop up in the first, say, 2 weeks of training camp. And that I don't think you could rule that strategy out, because if there's a team who has a legit edge rusher, but maybe not a lot of depth at that position, and that team views itself as a contender, perhaps that would give him some leverage that he's clearly been lacking to this point.
Well, I was telling Aldo before we started the show, I've known Rosenhaus since '88 when he came into the league. So I know him pretty well, and I get along with him well. And I sent him a text this morning. So I said, between you and me, the Bears got any interest in Ngakoue? And I said, they need a pass rusher. And usually he gets back to me. He gets back to me usually right away. He didn't get back to me. That tells me they've shown some interest.
Although if he would have got back to you right away, I don't know, Greg. Whenever I've asked an agent, not whenever, the majority of the time when I've asked an agent if a team has interest in his client, it's a resounding yes, and so do a lot of other teams.
No, I know how Drew plays the game. He'll say, "Oh yeah, there's 8 teams trying to get him," But I sent that at 8:00, and as of right now, I haven't gotten a reply. And usually I get a reply from him within 30 minutes. So I just found that
maybe that could be a sign, and he would definitely help the defense and provide something that it's missing. Because you're going to be hopeful that guys like Dominique Robinson and Travis Gibson can emerge. Travis Gibson's a guy who had 7 sacks in 2021. You'd have to spend some time going back and looking at the specific plays to see perhaps how much of that was getting help because a future Hall of Famer in Robert Quinn was having a monster season and teams were having to look out for him. Occasionally guys will clean up plays that are created by the edge rusher on the opposite side of them or things of that nature. But but Gibson put up some numbers, and so that gave you some optimism going into last year. But shoot, it was like a disease. None of those guys.
I know they were disappointed, and he just didn't show up for whatever reason. Robinson,
it was a new
an excuse.
But Robinson got up to that. He made some terrific plays in that opener against the 49ers, and then you felt like, boy, I haven't seen Robinson do much in a couple of weeks, and then it's the middle of the season, and you're like, where's Robinson been? It could be a situation where he was a guy he's still new to the position, right? He played.
It's only his fourth year now playing the position.
Right. You see a lot of these young guys who enter the league. Second move with a counter. So perhaps that's something that he's been able to try to expand his toolbox a little bit this offseason, because it's a big year for him. I know he's a fifth round pick. Year two, the arrow needs to be pointing up.
Yeah, he's got it. I mean, this. Usually with most rookies, they take that big jump between year one and year two, and they take off. So, and Travis was the same way. Travis had 3 or 4 sacks his first year as a rookie playing part-time, and then he got 7 or 7.5 in the second year. He took off, but then did he level off? That's what we don't know. But when you look at the physical traits of Robinson, he's got like a 40-inch vertical jump, and he's got a real long jump. He's very explosive. He just has to learn how to play.
And play against some good tackles, I mean,
no question.
It'll be interesting to see how the defense performs, but there's just I think there's a little bit of a buzz. I don't think it's nationally about the Bears, but I think locally, there's legitimate reason to feel like this is a really interesting team. Terrible, like 10-game losing streak at the end of the year. Bears have been playing football as long as anybody. That's a franchise record dropping.
I know
10 in a row. And as I've told people, it's really hard to win 10 games in a row in the NFL. At the same
might be
time,
harder to lose.
At the same time, it's really difficult to lose 10 games in a row. I mean, that's hard to do. The NFL. There's like this gravitational pull you used to say toward 500, which the only way you get to 500 now is if you've got a tie in the mix, right? But the NFL has this gravitational pull that kind of brings most teams in. You used to say that 7 to 9 win range, and if a team is talented and healthy, it gets to 10, 11 wins. If it's an elite team that's healthy, you're talking about 12 plus wins. And then when you've got a team that's hit with injuries, that's where you get into that 5 to 6 win range. You got a bad roster, 5 to 6 range. You've got a bad roster and injuries, and then you're like sub 5. And so it was a bad roster last year. It's a very different roster this year. It's a young roster, and they've got some exciting players. So that's why there's legit buzz, I think, at least locally, about this team. The Bears will have to go out and win some football games and win a few games in impressive fashion, I think, for people around the country to sit up and take notice. But that's what happens when you've been down for a while.
Oh, yeah. I don't worry about what the national people say, because reality is they don't study a team. They're not looking at it and looking at the acquisitions and knowing what's going on day to day. So they're going off of last year. And so they sucked last year, so they're going to suck again this year. And then we'll see what happens.
They've just been mediocre for a long time with some brief exceptions. And that's why when Poles was hired, one of the things that I think people need to keep in mind when they talk about a timeline and a plan and all that stuff is he talked about, and they all talk about it, right? I mean, he's not the only GM that comes up with these talking points that will resonate with his bosses, which are ownership and a fan base, but it was sustained success, and the Bears have struggled. I mean, that's a near impossibility at House Hall. There haven't been consecutive winning seasons since 05-06. So he is what Poles is trying to do is put a foundation in place with a roster that that can get to success and then maintain it. And obviously, you got to have a quarterback to even talk about sustained success. And Justin Fields will be the number one storyline this season. And if he can emerge, then there's going to be an opportunity.
No, there's no question. The one thing, though, I give credit to Poles for is that, like everybody else, he's had a plan, but he's adhered to the plan. He hasn't deviated one iota from that plan and panicked and overpaid for somebody or oversigned. You know, he's had, like, I talked to him during free agency, and he said, "Hey, numbers got out of hand. I wasn't going there." You know, and I don't blame him.
You've got to be sound, especially when you're coming out of they were in, people talk about teams being in cap hell. The Bears weren't in cap hell, but they were in dead money hell last year, right? When you're sort of trying to reshape the thing in a hurry. So in order to stay healthy in terms of cap and what you've got with your resources, you've got to be prudent. And the time was not this offseason to make any sort of luxury buy, right? The buys that they made filled real needs. You look at the linebackers they paid, and you understand the defense and the background of the coach, and you're like, okay, makes sense to me.
Yep, no question. Look, I promised you 30 minutes, and we're a little over that. Aldo, you got any questions?
Yeah, if I can squeeze a couple in real quickly. My first one is Virginia McCaskey and Steve McMichael are semifinalists for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. What do you think their chances are?
I don't know. There's you look at the list of people that are included in the senior and contributor category, and some of these names you're like, wow, I can't believe they're not in. Or yeah. This is a reminder of how great a career they had. Virginia's interesting. She is beloved throughout the league. The other owners, I mean, she's just held in such high regard. And then, Mongo was such a great part of one of the historic defenses in the history of the league. The only thing that would be working against him is that there are so many guys from that team that are already in, but very deserving of being in the conversation, and really than just to have your name on a list like that.
Indeed. Triple R asks if you've been in the reporting game, Brad, for a long time, long enough to see the consumption of information go from newspapers and radio to YouTube videos and Zoom. Do you have a favorite era, a favorite preference of kind of this media consumption age?
Driving to the Chicago Tribune. That turns the lights on here at home. So much stuff gets aggregated these days, but it's great because as a fan you can stay plugged in around the clock wherever you are.
Yeah, and are you going to do your 670 hits during the football season on the Mully and Haw show?
I'm sure I will be back bright and early next week. Probably starting Monday. I think I probably want to get the lawn cut on Monday before reporting day on Tuesday. So I feel good about the start of the week. So I'll probably do that before I fire up the mower.
Well, the rookies are coming in Sunday, right?
The first day they're swinging the doors wide open to media is Tuesday.
Okay.
One quick one in here so that you guys can refute. There obviously no truth to any rumors of Josh Jacobs coming to Chicago trade, right? Come on.
That's where you can go down rabbit holes on social media and come up with a bunch of garbage. Yeah, I think their running back group will be.
I think it's good.
Yeah, it's going to be. They've got guys that could do a little bit of everything. One guy to keep an eye on in camp, Treston Ebner. He's kind of been the forgotten guy because it went out and got some other dudes, but. It felt really good about him catching the ball out of the backfield a year ago when they took him. They felt really good about him on special teams. I'm interested to see if in the first 2 weeks of camp, he can remind people why he's there, because he could be in the mix in that group as well.
I think worst case scenario is he's practice squad.
Yeah,
that's the worst case.
And Brad wrote about Treston Ebner in his Q&A column at the Chicago Tribune. And I really encourage all fans to go back and read some of those Q&A columns. And then his 10 thoughts that's released the day after a football game is must reading for everybody. Brad Biggs, you are one of the best in the business. We're really happy to have had you here.
Good day.
All right.
Thank you, buddy. Talk soon.
He's the best. He really is sensational. I wanted to, I knew we were over on time with him, but Frank earlier had posted this. He said, my favorite Bigsy moment was when he asked Matt Nagy about a scheme, and Nagy freaked out and said, I can't give you my game plan. It was such a weird and awkward and entertaining media moment. And I'll tell you, you and I know a lot of other fans, we watch a lot of these press conferences, and Brad is always, Brad is one of a handful of media members who's always asking really insightful questions. And every once in a while you get a reporter asking, what color underwear you're wearing. And why are you asking that? I don't know.
Well, first of all, he's very, very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
He knows and understands the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and for my take, for my money, he is by far the best guy on the beat in this town. Nobody's even close. And that guy's a bulldog now. He works his ass off, and he's got more connections around the league than probably everybody else in Chicago put together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does. And I go down to the Senior Bowl almost every year. I see him down there, and he's collecting information. He's not dawdling around. He's talking to people. He's doing one-on-ones with people. So I saw him at work. He's really a fabulous reporter, old school type, and he's adapted to this new media age. Because I see him on YouTube from time to time. He uses social media, Twitter, and so forth. So he's a man of great flexibility. Hats off to Brad Biggs, and again, really appreciate him being here.
Absolutely.
Greg, I wanted to get your take on this whole Virginia McCaskey, Steve Mongo McMichael 2024 semifinalists. Do you think there's any chance either one of them gets in?
I might become an asshole in Chicago. I think Virginia would get in before McMichael. I know McMichael was a good player, but was he up here? Granted, I wasn't here during that. I was working for the Giants during those great teams of Chicago, and we played against them in the playoffs for the '85 Bears and lost. And then the next year we got to the Super Bowl, so there was good competition between the two of us. But, there was that defensive line as a whole. There was Hampton and Dent and you had Singletary and stuff. It's like I've always looked at it, and I'm not taking away from his ability, but more of a piece to the puzzle than the big piece. But I may be totally wrong on that. That's just the way I see it.
Well, I want to tell our fans that tonight at 8 p.m., he's actually going to be on around 9:15, 9:30 Central Time on the Bear Their Soul show. Jack Silverstein is going to make the case for Steve McMichael. He's going to come armed with stats. It's almost like he's going to be making his pitch to the Hall of Fame committee.
Well, that's Pompei's job.
Yeah, that's right. And very good at it, too.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to talk to Pompey about that because he's on the Hall of Fame committee.
Well, you know, that's how I've talked to guys who've been on the selection committee and the voting committee, and really it's a local guy that does the presentation.
All the time, huh?
Yeah. And so, you know, so that's, I don't know who else is on the committee besides Pompey coming out of Chicago, but Dan would be the big seller.
Yeah, and I got to tell you that I think, in my opinion, is the right approach because nobody knows the extensiveness of a player's career than a guy who's been covering him, interviewed him in the locker rooms, heard stories about him from other players and the training staff and so forth. And so you get the best information. As you said so accurately to Brad, the national media, they don't know anything. I mean, not that, you know, I'm exaggerating there, but they don't know the intricacies of a game. You know, they don't see every minute of a Bears game. They don't see every minute of a football player's career. And so their information is limited. So guys like Brad Biggs and Don Pompey are treasures.
You know, I follow 3 or 4 teams closely. And so I know them well. And obviously the Bears and the Bills the best. But I can't tell you about the other teams. And I've worked in this my whole adult life. You know, so when I see some of the stuff that the national media puts out, I just laugh at it because they most of them don't know what they're talking about. Guys like Mark Lombardi, and Mike is a friend. And I've known Mike for almost 40 years. And number one, he knows that and I might have said this before, he knows he's going to piss people off when he says negative things about the Bears. So he does it purposely, you know, and he gets clicks out of it. And you know, I had him when I was doing a pregame show on the Score when they were playing like a Sunday night game. I had the 9 to 12 slot, you know, with another co-host, and we had him on a couple times, and you know, I let him say his piece. I didn't agree with him, but that was like the 2018 year when he was killing Trubisky, and Trubisky actually had a pretty good year.
Yeah, he did, and hopes were high for Trubisky back then, but not to be. All right, we are going to talk about the linebacker group. We've been doing our positional breakdowns that Greg has given us his thoughts on a number of positions, and today we have picked the linebacker group, probably arguably the one position group that has gone through the biggest change with 2 major acquisitions at the linebackers. And so we'll start with the projected starting linebackers. We've got Tremaine Edmonds, acquired via free agency from the Buffalo Bills, and T.J. Edwards from also from, was T.J. with the Buffalo?
No, he's Philly.
Philly, I'm sorry, of course. And then second-year player Jack Sanborn returns to get snaps at the linebacker. Now, there could be competition for Sanborn, but right now these are the 3 projected linebackers. Take them one at a time. Greg, take it away.
Well, I'll start with Sanborn first. I don't know if you can project him as a starter. It's not that he's not a good player, because I really like him as a player.
Okay.
It's that in this defense, most games, you're starting out with just 2 linebackers. You're starting out in sub, unless you're playing a team that's predominantly just 2 wideouts. And then you're going to play with that 3rd linebacker. But so you're starting out with 3 corners, and your slot corner is taking the place of the Sam linebacker. So your 2 main linebackers are going to be your Mike, Tremaine Edmonds, and T.J. Edwards at the will. And then the other guys. Now, a lot of games last year, they only had 5 linebackers active on Sunday. And part of the year, there's only 5 on the roster. I'm going to think they're going to have 6 this year, at least going into the year, because there's some talented guys you just don't want to cut. And for those last positions, I think it's going to be one of the interesting shows in camp or battles in camp to see, who makes it and who doesn't. Obviously, Tremaine and Edwards are at the top. We talked about Tremaine with Big Z. I just think his game has gotten better and better every year. He's become very, very instinctive. And he's got the added dimension and that he's an excellent blitzer. And you can put him outside to rush. You can put him, on a delayed blitz inside, and he's very, very effective doing it. And his coverage skills, I think, are rare, and especially with his height, his length, and his athleticism to go along with his speed, he takes away the middle of the field, much like Brian did when Urlacher was here in the Lovey years. And, we're playing the same scheme. So he's a big help. And the funny thing is that TJ Edwards is a lot like Lance Briggs. Their size, their speed coming out of college, pretty much identical. And TJ is extremely instinctive, just like Lance was. And you could say arguably he was one of the best players on that really strong defense that Philly had last year. That's another good acquisition. I was just shocked from day one when they signed him on the first couple hours of free agency that they got him as cheap as they did. Yeah. That was really a surprise. Mm-hmm. And he's a local kid. Being that he's home now, that's going to probably make him work even a little bit harder and play a little bit harder. And there's nothing wrong with his effort before when he was playing in Philly. The guy's a hell of a player. So after that, though, it's like, who are the next 3 or 4 guys? Well, Sanborn, I think, is a given. Mm-hmm. And I think you got another given in Dylan Cole because they gave him a little money. He's a veteran, played for Tennessee the last few years. But he is an excellent special teams player. Mm-hmm. He can play Sam. I think he's a Sam and a Mike. I'm not sure if he can play the will position. But these backups, these guys we're talking about now, they have to be able to, because the Sam does not play that much, they have to be able to be able to step in if Edwards goes down or if Edmonds goes down. So they've got to be capable of playing those positions. I think that, if Edmonds went down, the first guy you're going to look at for the Mike is Sanborn, and then the next guy would be Sterling Weatherford, who they picked up on waivers from the Colts, and that was one guy Ballard was pissed about. Really wanted to stash him on the practice squad. But, the Bears scouting department, give them credit. They did a good job scouting the kid during the preseason because he's a size speed guy, played at the MAC, and, needed some grooming. Did some things on special teams last year when he got an opportunity, but now it's his second year. So this is the year he's got to take a jump. Then there's Noah Sewell, who they drafted. Because they drafted him, that they're not going to want to get rid of him. Now, I've heard some people say, well, we can put him at edge and he can rush the passer. He's not a pass rusher. He's just over 6'1", and he's got 31.25-inch arms. That's not what they're looking for as an outside pass rusher. He just doesn't have the traits. Is he effective as a blitzer? Yes, but he's a pretty damn good linebacker, off-the-ball linebacker. He's got good cover skills. He fills the gaps really well. He can take on blocks. He makes plays. He's instinctive. And he's another guy that I think can probably play all 3 positions. Now, whether they have him just learn 2 or 3, that remains to be seen because it's pretty difficult to put that much on a rookie's plate. But he's going to be there. So between Cole, Sanborn, and Sewell, that's 3, and that's 5 guys. And then so who was the 6th guy? And to me, the 6th guy would be Weatherford with an outside chance to DeMarcus Gates, who was, last year played a little bit. And
3 games, yeah.
Yeah. And filled in. He's got some athleticism. Mm-hmm. And so, but anybody after that, like Baskerville, Baskerville was a decent player at LSU. When you look at the his numbers, his raw numbers, height, weight, speed, I just don't think he's going to be fast enough or athletic enough. He is instinctive. There's no question about that. So, I mean, he's really going to have to jump out to make this team.
Foster Covers asked a question. When was the last time the Bears had this much quality and depth at linebacker? Do you agree, first of all, with the assessment that this is a team filled with quality and depth?
On paper, there's a lot of talent. It remains to be seen if it's quality depth yet. Mm-hmm. So, if you say Sanborn's number 3, the first 3 are pretty damn good. The first 2 are excellent. First 2 are Pro Bowl caliber players. Okay, so then Sanborn is a good player. And part of the reason is I think one of the most important things a linebacker has to have is he's got to have great instincts. And that's what Sanborn does. He has unbelievable anticipation. So, and Weatherford is actually the same way. When you look at his tape from Miami of Ohio, he's a rookie. He's tall, he's fast, needed to get a little bit bigger. I think he was about 2 1/4 last year, needed to get a little heavier and a little bit stronger, but the talent's there. So I'm not ready to say that it's the deepest, most talented group, because we had a pretty good group here with Urlacher, Briggs, Hunter Hillemeyer, and we had some backups behind them that were decent players. So that group was pretty damn strong. Mm-hmm. So, but this group has the ability to be equal to that group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think Foster will agree that group was perhaps the last group of players at the linebacker.
Colvin wasn't. He's got
J2K
/ Colvin, yeah. But that Colvin was not here playing for Lovey, I don't believe, maybe 1 year, and he went to New England.
He was. I remember he was here the season where we beat the Cardinals. We know the Bears are who we thought they were.
Okay, that was our Super Bowl year. I don't remember him being there that year, but maybe you're right.
Yeah, and let's not rely on my memory for things. That's for sure. J2K goes on to say, I love Poles' approach to signing and drafting Chicago area guys. It adds another depth to building an all-in team and great locker room culture. You agree with that?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it puts a lot of pressure on those kids. Mm-hmm. They want to perform because they're playing at home. So, but that added pressure of having to make the team and play good. We drafted Garrett Wolf, from Northern Illinois, who had a hell of a career at Northern Illinois, and he kind of flamed out. Part of it was injury related. Yeah. Took him in the 3rd, probably took him around too high. But that one didn't work out. Now this team, God, they got, there's Sanborn, there's Komet, there's Edwards, there's the backup center that drafted last year. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that are local kids. Yeah, now we got to see. And the draft was full of local kids. I mean, they could have drafted 5 guys locally if it just fell that way.
Mm-hmm. Very, very true. All right, let's see. We've got Tim. Many teams put so much stock in the combine and draft players in the early rounds based on athleticism instead of what the tape shows. Many of those players flake out. He's curious about your take on that.
I don't agree with that statement at all.
Okay.
Because it's the media who puts the stock on the combine. You've heard coaches say time and time again, and the same with personnel directors. They're running around in shorts. what you want to do at the combine is what's nice about the combine is you get to compare players at the same position on the same surface on the same day under the same conditions. So there's no change in variable. Other than if you're in the first group or the second group and you're working out at 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning. Other than that, everything's the same. So to be able to compare, it's truly comparing apples to apples, pure athleticism. But, you hear the names that jump out at the combine, and the media makes a big deal about it. And you'll say draft analysts go, he jumped up 2 rounds. Well, research that and then go to the draft and see who really did jump up. Or did they go where they were supposed to go? Because in most cases, they went when they were supposed to go. Because it's still the most important thing in the evaluation is what they do on tape. Can they play? Or are there some guys that you take because they're freak athletes? Yeah, because then, a coach and a personnel director, they're going to fall in love with that athleticism, and then they're going to dream of what he can be. But you got to be careful with that.
Indeed. But there is for small school players, guys who have not played against top talent, they're the ones that who potentially could jump up after the All-Star games and after the combine performance, because that's scouts' first look at them being alongside players who have come from big schools and so forth. That fair to say?
Yeah, definitely, because you're seeing first rule of thumb when you're going into a small school is he's got to dominate that level of comp. He's got to jump off the tape and be the best player on the field. So, regardless of the position. Now you stick him in an all-star game and he's up against Power 5 type competition. Now you want to see what he does. And that game's probably more important to him than is, say, a kid from Alabama or Missouri or Illinois, because he is up against better players and you want to see how he performs. And is he an equal or better? And so then, that type of guy, you could project, say, okay, now if I get him and I get to coach him, because, if he's coming from D3 or D2 or something, he's not getting the coaching that he's getting at a Power 5 school. And it's not, I'm not taking away from the coaches at those levels, but just those guys are usually young guys that are trying to work their way up, and they're just not quite as good as the coaches that you're going to see at the powerhouses. So, I think there's truth to that, but it's like anything else, you're going to miss on a couple of them too.
Yeah. Danger T asked a question. Greg, what would you consider a successful season in 2023? Is it having a winning record or development of Justin Fields and other players?
That's a good question. I think it's a combination of the both. I'm on record as saying I think they can win 9 games. And who the hell was I talking to that said, "Oh, hell, I got 10 down"? And I think was it Ed Holden that said that?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's possible. They got to get out quick. You got to stay injury free, but at the same time, you got to see the arrow going up with Justin. Now, I'm totally confident that that's going to be the case. And part of the reason is, and go back to the conversation we had with Pep, and I think Pep misunderstood a little bit, when he said, well, you're comparing Justin to one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I really wasn't doing that. Comparing Justin to Josh Allen when he was going into his 3rd year. And when he was going into his 3rd year, there was people in the media saying he might not make it. He's got to take the jump this year. And that's the same thing they're saying about Justin Fields.
Yeah. Well, I'm of the opinion that if we see progression from Justin Fields and some of the other players, then it's going to manifest itself in more wins. Now, the question is how many wins, right? I think if Fields makes a big leap, that all of a sudden he starts to look like a franchise quarterback, this team will be in playoff contention because I think this division is weak outside of the Lions. I really do believe the Lions are going to be a tough team to beat this season. They seem to be on a great trajectory, how they've built their roster. I'm still not a fan of their coach, but sometimes you win even if you've got a questionable coach. All right, let's see what else we got here. There's a lot of discussion in the chat room about assistant general manager Ian Cunningham. Let me phrase the question to you this way. You were against the idea of bringing in somebody above the general manager to act as the general manager's boss. But the idea of bringing in an assistant general manager to help with player personnel decisions, is it fair to say that you are a fan of this approach, that the GM now has a sounding board and somebody with connections throughout the league? There's been a lot of transactions with the Philadelphia Eagles where Cunningham came from. Do you like this kind of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid partnership they've developed?
Well, sometimes, and I'm not saying this to make it sound like anti-Ian, because I he's very qualified, very talented, and he's going to be a GM in the league. There's no question about it. But what's happening around the league, which was not going on when I was there, is these different layers that you have within a personnel department. Okay, go back to when I was, spent most of my time in the league. You had a general manager, college scouting director, and a pro scouting director. So it was 1, 2, 3. Right. And you didn't have all these different layers of guys. Now, when I was with the Giants, Tom Boyster was the college scouting director, but he had the title player personnel director. He had nothing to do with the pro side. Timmy Rooney was the pro director. So, title means nothing. Job description means everything. And we didn't have the titles here. Bobby DePaula was the pro director and myself.
Right.
Director of college, director of pro. But our job responsibility was every bit as equal when you look at what we were being asked to do as a player personnel director. We didn't get the paycheck of a player personnel director, and it's probably by design. I know it's by design, not probably by design, but that is what it is. Now you got, if you want to bring in quality people, you got to find the right title for them. Otherwise, the other team can say no.
Yeah.
So you give a guy like Ian, he was a personnel director in Philly. Well, you can't. They can say no if you want to make him the personnel director here. So you got to make him the assistant GM.
Yeah, makes sense. Sure.
So you see what I'm doing? But what's he really? He's the personnel director. Well, I mean, is he doing some of the job that Poles does? Overseeing something, of course. You did it, but that was the same when we were here. We were helping Jerry do some things. So the important thing is, and like I say, you're seeing it across the league, is that to get really a lot of quality people, you give out bigger titles. And, there was only a couple, when I was working in the league, there was only a couple assistant general managers. Now, just about every team has one. And it's just another, layer. Even like after I left the Giants, they never had the quote personnel director that, general manager, personnel director, college director, pro director, until just in the last couple of years. They had it the same way we had it, and I remember John Mara talking about it because Jerry Reese wanted to hire a personnel director. And John Mara says, why? That just puts another person in between you and your scouts.
And what's interesting about that, though, Greg, is that I'm of the opinion that it's great to have a bunch of guys who can collaborate and got different opinions and so forth. But what is key is the final decision maker has to really make decisions based on the information collected and not the personalities. For instance, well, I got to go with what this person says because they're always sharing ideas and I haven't done anything that he has said. Well, screw that. If you've got somebody on the team who isn't giving you good advice or good insight or insight that you think is the best, don't worry about it. Just make the decision.
It's a good point because you get at the end of the draft and you got your area scouts, and there's some years when a guy didn't get any of his guys drafted. Mm-hmm. And it's not because he didn't do a good job. A lot of times it's the way it fell.
Yeah.
It's real simple.
Yeah.
So when my phone was busy, I just want to see if it was Rosenhaus.
Oh, this would be cool. This would be cool. If you've missed the earlier part of the show, Greg sent a text to Ndakwe's agent, Drew Rosenhaus, but no response. Okay, that would have been great. Says, oh, yeah, we're going to lock something up in a few minutes. Yeah, that would have been awesome. All right, great points. And we've got some more questions to address here before we sign off. Let me go to, this is a great question from Dented Fender. How does a scout determine a prospect's heart? Because jeez, I mean, that can really push a player from average to really good and from really good to superstar.
Well, what you're saying, heart is really football character. And football character is love of the game. The game's important to him, his work ethic, wants to be the best he can be. That's part of your job, finding that out, talking to the right people at the school. Mm-hmm. And don't just talk to the pro liaison. Talk to the strength coach. Talk to the trainer. Know who knows a lot? The equipment guy. Because remember, we were talking last week about Northwestern, and I said, what room is connected to the locker room? It's almost all one room, the equipment. Mm-hmm. They know everything that's going on in the locker room.
Yeah.
And those guys are great guys to know. Another good one to know, academic advisor.
Because they'll tell you how they're doing in school and what are their strengths.
What the interests are, what the interests aren't. They know the kid sometimes a little better away from the locker room.
Gotcha.
The school. So and then you go back, and if it's a guy you're really interested in, go back and talk to some people from his hometown, high school. High school coach isn't always the best guy because he's going to praise the shit out of him. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you want somebody to give you some dirt.
Exactly.
If there is any dirt.
Yes, exactly. You want the truth. You want the truth is what you want.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see. We've got here D. Starren asks, going back to the 2021 NFL draft, is Justin Fields the fourth best quarterback in this draft, or is he equal to Trevor Lawrence at this point? So the four quarterbacks selected in that draft, of course, were Trevor Lawrence first, Trey, I'm forgetting his name now. Trey Lance second, Justin Fields. The Bears traded up in the 11th slot to draft Justin Fields, and then the kid from Alabama went to the Patriots with the 16th pick, I think it was.
Well,
Mac Jones.
Right now, 2 and 3 are trending towards bust, which is not unusual but who knows what? With Trey Lance, part of it's injury, and I'll go back because we've talked about this a number of times on here. Old school, and I'm old school. I don't know if you get any more old school than me. And it's you got to have some history, especially at that position. He had no history. One season at the FCS level, and then one game the following year in an offense that was predominantly a run offense, not a predominant pass offense. He had tools. He had traits. So what did I say a little while ago? You fall in love with what he can be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But at that position, you better have shown me what you can do. Okay, Justin Fields got his team in the same draft, got his team to the national championship game.
Yep.
Won the Big Ten. Beat Michigan twice. The guy quarterback the last 2 years for Michigan, C.J. Stroud, or for Ohio State the last 2 years, he didn't beat Michigan once.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a stain on his resume.
Yeah.
Because that's the big game. And
yep.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the biggest concern that I've had about Justin Fields is, how quickly he has not been processing in the NFL. And so a couple of weeks ago, I went back and looked at some tape from him at Ohio State, and I said, wow, he really processes much faster at Ohio State. Well, the reasons are obvious. And for one is, the guys were much more wide open in college football than they are in the NFL. And so I don't think it's an issue of processing in the NFL. It's just him having the confidence to let it go, throw the ball. Kurt Warner did a tape breakdown on Justin Fields, and those were the words he kept repeating over and over again. Throw the ball. Well, and so sometimes he just has to have confidence.
And nobody brings it up.
Mm-hmm.
3 offenses in 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
2020, Ohio State's offense. 2021, Matt Nagy's offense. 2022, Luke Getsy's offense.
Yeah.
Ain't easy.
Yeah. That's right.
First time now in 4 years that he's played in the second offense, or, played in an offense 2 years in a row.
Don Burr is saying, well, you got to factor in that Fields played with all these great wide receivers, and so that they made him look better than he really is.
He had a complete freaking pass, man. He completed 69% of his passes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you, man. Of course, Don, for those who don't know, is a Detroit Lions fan, and they've got a good team this year, but they will somehow figure out a way to screw it up. Tim
Lions, just like when I was with the Giants, we used to say, the Jets will be the Jets.
The Lions will be the Lions.
A national writer texted me yesterday. He said, what, in your opinion, is the big story of the offseason this year? And I said, well, it's got to be Rodgers to the Jets. And he goes, well, do you think they're going to be that good? So, and this is all done via text.
Sure.
So I sent it back a text. I said, well, I spent 17 years with the Giants. I said, most of that time, George Young was the general manager. And George used to say, the fucking Jets always win the offseason. But when the season starts, they're the fucking Jets, and they suck.
And that is the best George Young impression that you'll ever hear.
So, that's I sent that back to the guy. He sent back a laughing face.
Tim wants to know, the Bears had the best draft classes since the 80s during your time there. What things were you looking for, Greg, and what were some deciding factors to know that you needed to draft certain players?
We put a premium on football character, and we missed on one. Missed badly. First-round pick, Michael Haynes. And the scout paid for it, because that's the onus of that is put on the scout.
Yeah.
That's his number one job. We've told him, you can miss on the talent because we got guys to back you up. You're the guy going into the school. Mm-hmm. You got to have that football character right.
Yeah, right.
And but that was, obviously you had to have the traits to play the position. You had to be a competitive football player. But we found guys that love football, love to play the game. They're competitors. They're winners. For the most part, they came from pretty good programs. And that's a little thing that nobody talks about that much. getting guys that come from quality programs because they're used to winning. And it goes back to when Bigsy was on. Now, and he was saying, well, these young guys, they're just hitting the prime of their careers. But look at the programs they came from. Yep. Philadelphia, Buffalo, Tennessee's, a perennial playoff team. Those are free agent acquisitions that came from winners. Mm-hmm. And that's going to help in the locker room.
Cornelius wants to know, did Michael Haynes finally become a zoologist? Because that, I believe, was his major at Penn State.
I don't have any idea.
You guys don't talk. I asked, I'm going to share this, Greg, a personal thing. I asked Greg about Joaquin Iglesias, who might be a guest joining us on the Bear Their Soul show tonight. And Greg says, I haven't been keeping track with him. He didn't play very well for us or very much for us. I think it was a 3rd or 4th round draft pick, but interested in talking to him and catching up with him. Hopefully he's going to join us on Bear Their Souls, 8 p.m. Central tonight. All right, let's get a couple more out of here. Gustav has a long one here, but essentially is how many of the sacks last year were Justin Fields' faults? Because Justin was sacked 55 times last season, among the highest in the NFL, if not the highest. I contend that at least half of those were on him. Do you agree with that?
I was going to say at least half were on the line.
Yeah, well, the same thing.
I mean, not on, at least half were on the line or maybe more.
Okay.
Because you have blitzes. I mean, opposing defenses now, they know they had trouble on the offensive line. Mm-hmm. And so now you're sending more guys than you got to block. Mm-hmm. And you're creating problems. And you just got no protection. So upgrading the protection, and the protection got better. And then as the protection got better, then Fields hurt his shoulder. But all you got to do is look at the numbers and where the arrow started going up. See, I think people are just too damn critical of the way he played. And I go back because I came up with, people just expect too much too soon. They want instant gratification instead of letting a player grow the way he's supposed to grow. Chase Claypool's a perfect example. Well, he's supposed to come in here and catch 8 balls a game. Mm-hmm. It's not the offense he played in Pittsburgh. He didn't even know the terminology, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
Right. And then he gets dinged up a little bit, and Fields hurts his shoulder. That slows up the whole process. So they worked it out this season. Now you see stupid stuff because you see videos of some players working with Justin. In the meantime, Claypool on the Bears' dime and with the NFL sponsorship was across the pond running football camps for kids in Europe for about a 10-day period, which is a credit to him. He didn't have to do that. And, he should have been practicing. Well, he's been practicing last week and this week down in Florida. So shut up.
That's right. That is good. Jeff says there was a lot of fault on both parties. Justin took too long, too often, and the line gave up too much pressure frequently, especially on the interior. And that was
okay. But now I'm going to say one thing about that because the players even admitted to it. Mm-hmm. And there were times, and I remember Mooney said it on once in a presser after the game. He goes, "I was running last year's route." You're not on the same page.
That's right.
And that was on Mooney. But who gets the held accountable? The quarterback, because he's got the ball in his hand.
That's right. You see the game, it looks like it's Justin Fields. You walk away with that memory, and then all of a sudden in a midweek press conference, Darnell Mooney says, "Yeah, we have a similar play from last year that I thought that was the play, and so I ran the wrong route." It's like, dude. And then nobody knows that because they don't listen to the interviews. All right. I think we've got one more. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to ask you instead about Jalen Carter is being sued by, I guess, one of the people involved in the traffic accident.
Right.
First of all, I did not know this, but I just seen this in a headline. Jalen Carter was driving with a suspended license. That's one thing. And now this lawsuit against Carter and the University of Georgia states that Carter left the scene of the crime because he was worried about his draft status, and that was.
Did he say that, or did somebody write that?
That's the allegation in the lawsuit.
Okay, well, of course it's the allegation in the lawsuit.
Right.
Don't forget, when you get lawsuits like that, the allegations are always really strong.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about it. And does it surprise me that he's being sued?
Mm-hmm.
No. He just, he's making some money.
Yes, indeed. That usually happens.
The bottom line is, go back to that punter the Bills drafted, from San Diego State. And there was that allegation. The Bills ended up cutting him because of the bad publicity, which they never should have done, because it took months to find out that he wasn't involved at all. Okay, so... But he got sued, and he almost got charged. And when they did their investigation, they couldn't even charge him because he wasn't involved. But in today's world, you're proven guilty before the facts are there. You're guilty before it used to be, and the way it's supposed to be is you're innocent until proven guilty. Now you're guilty until proven innocent. Yeah. And even when you're proven innocent, there's a lot of doubts. So am I sticking up for Jalen Carter? No, not at all. Should the Bears have drafted him? No, not at all. And is this going to be a distraction for him as a rookie? Yeah. Will it cost us some money? I think that remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, and here's exactly what the lawsuit says. Carter's friend, Georgia offensive lineman Warren McClendon, was, according to the lawsuit filed earlier last week by crash survivor Victoria Bowles, and I'm reading this from a fan-sided site, that McClendon said to Carter, "Yo, hey, JC, you might want to get the fuck out of here, And so Carter took off and he fled. It's a tough situation. There's no doubt about it. You're thinking about, your future, and there's this horrible car crash that you probably are seeing the car in flames, and you're thinking, well, what the hell can I do about it? But he did lie to police afterwards. That is a pure fact. That's not an allegation. Well, I should say that the police are alleging that he lied, because anybody can lie nowadays. So it's a tough situation. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because earlier you talked about character. And so clearly the Bears had this information. They sat down with Jalen Carter, and if he was honest, they asked him questions about why didn't you stay and so forth. And that probably gave them the heebie-jeebies and said, we can't take a chance on this guy.
Yeah, I think there was a variety of things.
Okay.
And then and just going back to listen, and I'll just put my lawyer's hat on here. When the offensive lineman McClendon supposedly said so-and-so. Well, who said he said it? Or is that just an allegation that he said it? Don't forget, you get these lawsuits, there's a lot of BS on the side, because the burden of proof isn't anywhere close to what it is in a criminal court.
That's very true. Yeah.
So it's just, it's let it play out. It's not our worry. He's not on our team, and what happens. But the Bears hierarchy made their decision to pass, and it's probably a good decision.
That's my point right there is, Carter could end up being a superstar player, but under the circumstances with what's happened and what the allegations are and so forth, I can't see why the Bears at this point in their rebuilding process would take a chance on Jalen Carter. I wish him much luck. I hope he's not guilty of anything, but hopefully the truth wins out on that.
You know what I think is important in here, and it's probably important because if you've been reading anything about the University of Georgia in recent years, and something came out last week, they still got a big problem with speeding with their players. It's like every freaking player on the team's got speeding tickets, which tells you that the cops are looking to find them speeding.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously. So either the state cops in the area or the Athens, Georgia police or whatever, they're on the lookout for players going a little fast. But that also tells me the players got a sense of entitlement, which is not unusual. Mm-hmm. And they think they're above things. Mm-hmm. And they can get away with things. And in the case of Jalen Carter, when you think he had multiple speeding tickets, I think there's that one video of him get pulled over and the cop pretty much, let him off. And he was going like close to 100 or 88 to 45 or something like that. And it's, to me, it gets down to that there's no maturity or lack of the necessary maturity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And holding yourself accountable.
Yep. And another reason why it was a good idea to bypass him. A lot of people have been bringing up the case of punter Matt Araiza, I think is the pronunciation.
Well, that's what I was talking about. Matt Araiza. That's how you say
Araiza, yeah. And I don't know if you saw the HBO report, but he's kind of made it clear, I wasn't even in the room. And he did have sex with the woman, but he then left and she went inside and she was intoxicated and basically, being very promiscuous. And of course, that's no reason to get raped. Absolutely not. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that, he was definitely, or not, according to him, he was innocent of all the allegations. He has been cleared by the court of law. And so these things happen. Or he said, she said.
Well, he's cleared by, he never went to court. He was cleared by the police department, I think.
Yes, you're right. They said they were not going to file charges. Because
the district attorney and the police department did an investigation. They said he didn't do anything.
Right. He wasn't even inside. Video shows that he wasn't inside. And, again, hopefully the truth always wins out.
That cost him a shitload of money already.
He still cannot find a job in the NFL because of the teams are concerned about pressure from women's organization groups and other groups that they might be upset at signing him. But hopefully the true story of this whole thing comes out and then people can make a better informed decision.
Don't get me going on the cancel crowd.
All right, that's a good place to leave it here. We've given you 90 minutes of football. I just want to say we had some audio issues with Brad Biggs' connection. I'm going to clean that up for the audio podcast version of this episode. So it's going to take me a little while. It won't be up as quickly as it is, but if anyone who wants to check out the Brad Biggs interview, it will be already housed here on our YouTube channel and then on iTunes and Spotify, and those other places will come out later this afternoon. Greg, you're the absolute best. Nobody will ever cancel you for whatever reason.
I've probably been canceled half a dozen times. All I know.
For no good reason, I should add. We'll leave it at that. And if you can join us tonight at 8 o'clock, Bare Their Souls, our scheduled guests, Joaquin Iglesias and Jack Silverstein, will talk about Steve McMichael. Take care, everybody.
Okay, see you later, guys.